In my family, tradition is everything. But the Bishop family's most sacred ritual isn't about celebration. It's a horrifying tradition designed to break you. When I got engaged, my parents insisted I subject my fiancée to this cruel test of loyalty. They thought they could manipulate me, gaslight me, and force me to betray the woman I love. They believed I was just another link in their chain of toxicity. But they underestimated me. They forgot that every tradition has an origin story, and theirs was rooted in a dark, unforgivable secret. This isn't just a revenge story about a bridezilla or a family squabble. It's a deep dive into the psychology of a narcissistic family, the power of breaking cycles, and a wedding day no one will ever forget. This is the story of how I took back my life. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! The air in my parents' formal living room always felt thin, like there wasn't enough oxygen to go around. It was a museum of a room, cold and immaculate, in a sprawling faux Tuscan villa in a quiet suburb outside of Austin, Texas. Every piece of furniture was perfectly placed, every surface gleamed under the recessed lighting. It was a room designed for appearances, not for living. Just like my family, my fiancée, Chloe, sat beside me on the stiff silk-upholstered sofa, her hand a small warm anchor in the icy sea of my anxiety. Her presence here felt like a wildflower blooming through concrete, too bright, too alive for this sterile space. Across from us, my parents, David and Eleanor Bishop, sat in their matching wingback chairs, twin thrones from which they ruled their small, dysfunctional kingdom. "Chloe, darling," my mother began, her voice as smooth and polished as the marble floors. "I'm just so thrilled to finally welcome you into the Bishop family. We know you'll be a wonderful wife to our Matthew." It sounded warm, but I knew better. Every word from my mother was a carefully calibrated chess move. Chloe, bless her heart, smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Eleanor. I'm so excited to be a part of your family." My father cleared his throat, a sound that always signaled the beginning of a sermon. He was a man who spoke in pronouncements, a self-made real estate mogul who believed his net worth gave his opinions the weight of divine law. "Being a bishop is more than just a name, Chloe," he said, his eyes boring into her. "It comes with a certain responsibility, a legacy, a commitment to our values." I felt a cold dread begin to creep up my spine. I knew where this was going, which is why my mother continued, taking the baton seamlessly. "Thrawn made to discuss the blessing." Chloe looked at me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and confusion. I had, of course, tried to explain it to her, but it's impossible to describe the sheer insanity of my family's most horrifying tradition to an outsider. It sounds like a joke, a dark, twisted joke. The blessing, as my parents called it, was a pre-wedding ritual. A test of character for anyone marrying into the Bishop clan. The night before the wedding, the incoming spouse would be brought to this very room. They would sit alone, in the dark, for 1 hour. During that hour, my parents and my older sister Claire would enter the room one by one. Each would present the person with a trial, a single, difficult question or a demand designed to probe their loyalty, their integrity, and their willingness to put the Bishop family above all else. It was psychological warfare disguised as a quaint family custom. My own brother-in-law, Mark, a sweet, gentle guy married to my sister, had gone through it 5 years ago. He came out looking pale and shaken. Claire later told me, in a rare moment of candor, that my father had demanded Mark sign a post-nuptial agreement on the spot, one that would strip him of any assets if he ever disgraced the family name. My mother had asked him to choose between inviting his own estranged brother to the wedding or securing a lucrative business introduction from my father. Claire's trial was the cruelest. She brought up a past mistake of Mark's, a minor business failure from years before, and accused him of being financially reckless and unfit to provide for her. He passed their tests. He signed the papers, he uninvited his brother. He endured the humiliation, and in doing so, he cemented his place in the family. He learned, as we all had, that a bishop's love was conditional, transactional, and had to be earned through submission. It was a system built on narcissism and sustained by a web of codependent relationships, where everyone's worth was determined by their utility to my father. My whole life had been a performance of compliance. I was the quiet, agreeable son who got good grades, went to the right university, and joined the family real estate business without complaint. I did it because I was terrified of the alternative. I had seen what happened when you defied my father. I had a cousin who was completely cut off, financially and emotionally, for choosing a career in music over law. The message was clear: conform or be exiled. My relationship with my family was a classic trauma bond. I craved the approval of the very people who caused me pain, confusing their control for love. But meeting Chloe had changed everything. She was a landscape architect, a woman who created beauty and life out of dirt and chaos. She was kind and fiercely independent, and she saw the world with a clarity I had long since lost. She didn't see the powerful David Bishop. She saw a sad, controlling man. She didn't see the elegant Eleanor Bishop. She saw a woman who had traded her own identity for her husband's. She saw the truth, and her love was teaching me to see it too. It was the first time I'd ever experienced unconditional acceptance, and it was slowly, painstakingly, helping me form the boundaries I never knew I was allowed to have. The blessing sounds intense, Chloe said carefully, her eyes darting to me for support. It's a tradition that has served this family well for generations, my father said, his tone leaving no room for debate. It ensures that we are all aligned, that we are a united front. It weeds out those who are not truly committed. It's really just a formality, darling, my mother added with a dismissive wave of her hand. A chance for us to welcome you in a meaningful way. We're also looking forward to it. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced. She was framing an interrogation as a welcoming party. And what if I say no? Chloe asked, her voice quiet but firm. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. My parents stared at her, genuinely stunned. No one had ever said no. The very concept was alien to them. My father's face hardened. It's not optional, Chloe. It is a prerequisite for joining this family. If you refuse to participate in the blessing, you are, in effect, refusing to join the family. And if you refuse to join the family, then there can be no wedding. The ultimatum hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was the same tool they always used. Comply or be cast out. He wasn't just threatening to boycott our wedding. He was threatening to nullify my relationship with Chloe, to nullify me if I didn't fall in line. I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in this house since I was a small child. Pure, unadulterated rage. It was the rage of a cornered animal. All the years of biting my tongue, of swallowing my own feelings to keep the peace, of accepting their twisted definition of love, it all came boiling to the surface. The cognitive dissonance of loving my family and hating what they did was becoming unbearable. I looked at Chloe. Her face was pale, but her eyes were defiant. She would not be broken by these people. And in that moment, I knew I would not let them break her. I would not subject her to their sick, sadistic games. I stood up. The movement was so sudden it made my mother jump. There will be no blessing, I said, my voice shaking but clear. My father's eyes narrowed into slits. Matthew, sit down. This doesn't concern you. This is between us and your future wife. No, I said, stepping in front of Chloe, physically shielding her. Tom, this concerns me more than anyone. You will not do to her what you did to Mark. You will not do to her what you've done to all of us our entire lives. This tradition ends now. Now. You are being hysterical, Matthew, my mother said, her voice sharp. You're overreacting. It's a simple family custom. It's abuse, I shot back. It's a loyalty test that no loving family would ever need, and we are not participating. My father rose slowly from his chair, his full height radiating menace. He was used to obedience. My defiance was a malfunction in his perfectly ordered universe. Let me make this very clear, son. If Chloe does not receive the blessing, then this family will not give its blessing to your marriage. We will not be there. We will not provide a cent of financial support. You will be on your own. You will have chosen this, girl, over your own blood. The threat was meant to shatter me, and years ago it would have. But looking at Chloe, I felt a new kind of strength. A new kind of loyalty. My own blood had been poisoning me for 30 years. Chloe was the antidote. That's not a choice, Dad, I said, my voice finally steady. That's a gift. Thank you. Oh, I'm sad. We walked out of that room, out of that house, leaving my parents speechless in our wake. The shock on their faces was satisfying, but I knew this was far from over. A narcissist doesn't just accept defeat, They escalate. They punish. As we drove away, Chloe was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to me, her eyes full of a fierce love that I felt I didn't deserve. You were incredible," she whispered. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice thick with shame. "I'm sorry I ever let them think they could do that to you." "You didn't let them, Matt," she said, squeezing my hand. "You stopped them, you stood up to them. That's everything." But as we drove back toward the city, my father's words echoed in my head. A tradition that has served this family well for generations. Generations. It made me wonder. Where did a tradition this monstrous, this specific, even come from? It wasn't just a quirk, it felt ancient and deliberate. It felt like it had a purpose I didn't fully understand. And that's when a new thought, cold and unsettling, began to form in my mind. Every tradition has an origin story. What was the origin story of the blessing? And what if, hidden in the past, I could find the weapon I needed to destroy it for good? My father thought he was going to ruin my wedding. He had no idea I was about to ruin his entire life. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. The quest for the origin of the blessing became my obsession. It was the only way I could fight back. I couldn't beat my father at his own game of power and money, but I was a bishop. I had inherited his stubbornness, his meticulous nature. I would beat him with the one thing he couldn't control, the truth. My search began in the attic of my grandmother's house. She had passed away a few years prior, a woman as steely and formidable as her son. She had been the original matriarch of the Bishop dynasty, and her house was a time capsule. My sister, Claire, still lived there with Mark and their kids. Claire and I had a complicated relationship. She was my father's loyal soldier, but beneath the surface, I knew she was as damaged by our upbringing as I was. I called her, telling her I needed to look for some old family photos for a wedding slideshow. It was a flimsy excuse, but she agreed, her voice strained. The battle lines had been drawn, and she was on the other side. The attic was hot and smelled of dust and cedar. It was filled with forgotten treasures and painful memories. I sifted through boxes of old letters, yellowed photographs, and brittle documents. For hours I found nothing, and then, at the bottom of a heavy cedar chest I found it, a small, leather-bound journal. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and belonged to my great-grandmother, a woman I had only known as a stern-faced portrait above the fireplace. Her name was Victoria Bishop. The journal was dated 1928. I sat on the dusty floorboards and began to read. What I discovered was not a quaint history of a proud family. It was a Gothic horror story. Victoria wrote of her husband, my great-grandfather, Alistair Bishop I. He was a wealthy cotton broker in East Texas, a man of immense power and a terrifying violent temper. He ruled his family with an iron fist, and he had a secret. He was having an affair with a young woman in town, the daughter of one of his business rivals. His wife, Victoria, found out. She wasn't a meek, submissive woman. She was intelligent and proud. She confronted him. And he, in a fit of narcissistic rage, did not deny it. Instead, he twisted it. He accused her of being disloyal, of trying to undermine him, of failing in her duties as a wife. He locked her in her room for a week, with only bread and water until she learned her place. But the true horror came when their son, my grandfather, announced his engagement. Alistair, paranoid and controlling, was convinced his future daughter-in-law was a gold digger, a spy sent by his rivals to ruin him. He devised a plan, a test. He called it the examination. The night before the wedding, he brought the young woman into his study. He presented her with an ultimatum. He had fabricated a love letter, supposedly from her to another man. He told her that if she did not sign a confession of infidelity, a document that would give him the power to have her marriage annulled and her reputation destroyed at any moment, he would present the fake letter to his son and ruin her life anyway. He was testing her willingness to submit completely to his authority, to place his power over her own honor. My great-grandmother described the scene in chilling detail. The young woman, terrified and alone, signed the confession. She passed the test. She became a bishop, and a tradition was born. It had been passed down through the generations, evolving but never losing its core purpose: to ensure absolute control, to break the spirit of anyone new coming into the family, and to reinforce the idea that loyalty to the bishop patriarch was paramount. My father wasn't just continuing a quirky tradition. He was perpetuating a cycle of abuse that began with his grandfather's infidelity and paranoia. But there was one more secret hidden in that journal, a twist that made my blood run cold. In the final entries, Victoria wrote that she had gathered her own proof. She had letters. Letters from Alistair's mistress, detailing their affair, his promises to leave his wife, and most damnably, his schemes to defraud his own business partners, including the mistress's father. Victoria had planned to use the letters to expose him, to free herself and her son from his tyranny. But she never got the chance. The last entry was abrupt. It simply said, "He knows I have the letters. He is coming for me." There was nothing else. I searched the attic frantically. In the bottom of the chest, tucked beneath the journal's lining, I found a small, yellowed envelope. Inside were the letters, the proof. I suddenly understood. My great-grandmother hadn't just stopped writing. Alistair had stopped her. I didn't know how, but I knew with a chilling certainty that he had silenced her to protect his secret. And the family, either through fear or complicity, had buried the story, letting the horrifying tradition continue, its true, dark origins forgotten. I now held the one thing my father valued more than money, the family legacy, and I held the proof that it was built on a foundation of lies, abuse, and very possibly, murder. The day of my wedding arrived. As promised, my parents and my sister were not there. The ceremony, held in a beautiful botanical garden in Austin, was smaller, more intimate, and more joyful than any bishop event I had ever attended. Seeing Chloe walk down the aisle toward me, radiant and smiling, I knew I had made the right choice. This was my family now, but the day wasn't over. At the reception after the dinner and the speeches from our friends, I stood up. I told our guests that while my own family couldn't be there, I wanted to honor them by sharing a reading. A piece of our family's history. My best man handed me a small, leather-bound journal. "This is the diary of my great-grandmother, Victoria Bishop," I began, my voice steady, amplified by the microphone. "She started a tradition in our family. A pre-wedding ritual. My parents call it the blessing. I'd like to read you its origin story." And I read. I read about Alistair's affair, his cruelty, his paranoia. I read about the first examination, the false letter, the coerced confession. I could feel a stunned silence falling over our guests. Chloe was looking at me, her eyes wide, finally understanding the true depth of the horror I had saved her from. Then, I paused. "My great-grandmother was a brave woman," I said. "She planned to expose him. She had proof of his crimes. But she was silenced before she could. For almost a century, that proof has been hidden. Until now." I pulled the yellowed letters from my jacket pocket. "These are love letters, not from my great-grandmother, but to my great-grandfather. From his mistress. They detail not only their affair, but his plans to defraud her father and his other partners." I looked directly into the camera my videographer was using to record the reception. I knew my parents, consumed by curiosity and rage, would demand to see the video. This part was for them. This tradition, this blessing that my father holds so sacred, was not born of family values. It was born of a criminal's guilt and a bully's paranoia. The entire bishop legacy, the one he is so proud of, is a lie. It's a monument to the crimes of a man who abused his wife and betrayed everyone around him. I took a deep breath. And so I am ending it. Right here, right now. There will be no more blessings. There will be no more tests. The cycle of abuse stops with me. As for these letters, I said, holding them up, I'm sure the descendants of Alistair Bishop's business partners will find them very, very interesting. I believe a few of those families still have foundations and law firms here in Texas. I'll be sending them copies tomorrow. Sat down. The room was silent for a beat, and then it erupted in applause. It wasn't polite wedding applause. It was a roar of support, of understanding, of relief. Chloe was crying, but she was smiling. She came and wrapped her arms around me, and I held her tight, feeling a century of toxic weight lift off my shoulders. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The wedding video, as I predicted, made its way to my parents. The threat of the letters being released, of a century-old fraud being exposed, was enough to shatter my father's carefully constructed world. It would mean lawsuits, social ruin, the destruction of the bishop name he had worked so hard to sanctify. He called me the next day. For the first time in my life, he wasn't angry. He was defeated. His voice was a hollow rasp. He begged me not to release the letters. He offered me money, property, anything. "It's not about money, Dad," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "It was never about money. It's about the truth." I made him a deal. I wouldn't release the letters, but my price was his silence. He and my mother were to leave us alone. No contact, no interference, no more attempts to control my life or my family. He was to dismantle the tradition of the blessing, effective immediately, and tell the entire family why. He had to confess the truth to them. And he had to transfer a significant portion of his wealth into a trust for Mark and Claire's children. Reparations for the abuse he had put his own daughter and son-in-law through. He agreed to everything. His reign was over. A few weeks later, Claire called me. She was crying, but for a different reason. He told us, she sobbed, and he told us everything, about great-grandmother, about the letters. All these years, we were living in a horror story and didn't even know it. It was the beginning of a long, slow healing process for her, but for the first time my sister was free. My life is different now. It's quieter. It's my own. Chloe and I are building our own traditions, ones based on love, trust, and respect. I don't know if I'll ever truly reconcile with my parents, or if I even want to. Some cycles aren't meant to be healed, they're meant to be broken. I broke the chain. And in doing so, I didn't just save myself. I gave my great-grandmother, Victoria, the last word. And I finally got my blessing.